Okay, so the recording is already on. So let me briefly welcome Peter and then he can begin his talk.
Okay.
Okay, so good morning, friends. Sorry for all this confusion because our usual coordinator, Mr. Kamlesh Modak, is not here, so we have this problem. Our speaker this morning is Mr. Peter Coan. May I request everybody else to please mute yourself, everyone. And Peter has spoken before this group, so I'll briefly introduce him. Mr. Peter Coan is an English teacher, writer, and editor with an interest in the ending of suffering and the enjoyment of happiness. He has spent the last 35 years traveling, reading, and practicing various aspects of Buddhism, Hinduism, and the teachings of J. Krishnamurti. As such, of course, he rejects all of these as authorities while accepting them all as causes for gratitude. He is presently trying to develop a coherent exposition of non-dual philosophy, which is practical, evidence-based, and not reliant on any particular religious tradition. Today morning, Peter is going to talk to us on the 6 illusory dragons blocking the entry to the pathless land of truth. Basically, conditioning, dogma, nihilism, solipsism, egotism, and relativism. With these words, I want to thank Peter for being with us, and I also want to express my gratitude on behalf of Indore Study Circle that he accepted our invitation to speak before this group. So, Peter, you can take as long as you want and leave some time for question and answer. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for inviting me again. So, yeah, what I want to talk about today then is all of the mental obstacles that can prevent us from seeing what we want to see. What we want to see, of course, is what we were talking about last time, which is love. And last time we talked about the question of whether love can be taught, and we came to the conclusion that it probably can't, but that we are nevertheless going to continue trying because there's really not much else to do. We want to experience love, and we want other people to experience love. We want to have what we might call vidya, meaning knowledge or seeing, which means we want to get rid of avidya, ignorance, not seeing. So we have this, I think the picture is fairly clear that we have obstacles in the mind that prevent us from experiencing reality, which is love, which is non-dual bliss. And we want to see what those obstacles are so that we can tame them or put them in their proper place or get them out of the way so that we can see past them. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. So I'm suggesting that there are 6 different types. This is a lot of material for a 45-minute talk, so I'm sorry if I go a little quickly, but I'm sure we've all seen most of these ideas before, and we probably all know some of the ways to refute them, some of the ways to get past them, some of the problems that they cause. So we'll go over this very, very quickly, and hopefully in the process we'll see a little bit more clearly what's beyond the obstacles. What is it that we're actually trying to experience or to perceive directly? So let's start off with conditioning. Really, when I say dragons, of course, it's a nice image. That image comes from Chan Buddhism, which talks about 2 dragons at the start of the path. According to classical Chan Buddhism, the 2 dragons are nihilism and solipsism. and it's the job of the guru or the teacher to teach the student how to deal with nihilism and solipsism at the start of the Buddhist monk's training. So I think this is a problem that we very often get as lay Buddhists in the West. We don't have access to personal teachers or enlightened personal teachers. And so we tend to get or a lot of people tend to get caught on these first two dragons, nihilism and solipsism. And so we see lots of Buddhists saying things like everything is meaningless, which of course is nihilism, or everything is in the mind, which is solipsism. Whereas the classically trained Chan Buddhists will say, no, that's the first thing you have to get past. So when I'm using this word dragons, obviously I'm talking about something that's in the mind. It's an illusion, it's a trap, it's a concept. Like all concepts, it's useful to know, but not useful to be trapped by it. So can also be a habit, habitual thinking. Nihilism in particular is quite a nasty habit that people get caught into. Life is meaningless, nothing means anything. If you habitually think that way, then that will make your life a little bit less meaningful than it might be. Yeah, we have a nice barking dog there. So is a barking dog meaningless, or is it meaningful? Maybe it has some meaning. Maybe there's something interesting that we can learn from the barking dog. Yeah, I think a positive approach is to reject nihilism habitually at every opportunity. So when we have a barking dog, we look for the meaning in the barking dog. The meaning might be click my microphone to mute, for example, or it might be that it's pointing us to something interesting. So whatever happens has meaning. Anyway, these concepts, illusory concepts, can be difficult to escape from. If we can escape from them, if we can get past all these illusions, these dragons, these concepts, then what we come to is love, which is awareness, clear awareness, lucid awareness without obstructions, which maybe can't be taught, but what we can teach, possibly, is how to eliminate these obstacles. And so that's what we're going to do today. So here's what Mr. Krishnamurti said about that. Obviously, Krishnamurti said quite a lot about that, but I looked at one of his talks in particular when I was preparing this talk. So this is a talk he gave at Sarnen in 1967. So I think all the quotes I give in this talk from Krishnamurti are from this one talk, public talk on 9th of July 1967. So he said this: if you're willing, serious, and not merely casual and curious, then we'll go into it step by step, not missing a single movement. So he wants to go into this question in detail, not missing anything. That's quite a tall ask, isn't it? It doesn't mean that the speaker is going to become the analyst. There's no analyzer, no one to be analyzed. So he's saying this is not psychotherapy. What he wants to point us to is the fact, what is, that which is the non-dual truth, which obviously includes me, includes you, includes everything. It's not that there's part of it that's wrong and part of it that's right. It's that the whole thing is here. We want to see the whole thing. And maybe there are certain obstacles in our minds that prevent us directly seeing it. So when we know how to look at that which is, then the analyzer comes to an end totally. So he's using this term analyzer to mean the part of the mind that is creating these obstacles, that's creating concepts that prevent us seeing the non-dual reality, which is love. So let's look at conditioning then. Take this whole thing, emotion, thought, the power to retain, which is memory. From that memory, my conditioned responses, I act. So if we're not aware in the present moment, we're just acting from habit, we're just acting from conditioning, we're just doing the same thing we do every day without really thinking about it, then we're acting from memory. So it might be that we have identification with certain traditions, certain bodies of thought. I'm a Catholic, I'm a communist, I'm a capitalist, whatever it might be. I'm a Hindu, I'm a Buddhist. So from that conditioning, if anybody attacks that, if anybody questions it, I get annoyed. If I'm a Catholic and somebody says the Pope is not infallible, then I get angry. And that's an emotional response according to conditioning. Clearly, as long as we have these conceptual identities, these are obstacles. They're stopping us from seeing the non-dual nature of reality. If I'm a communist, it's very difficult for me to love capitalists. If I'm a capitalist, it's difficult for me to love communists, and so on. So conditioning clearly is something that can obstruct the view of reality. It's distorting. Conditioning causing distortion in the mind. So here he says, I always want to argue with him when he says something like this. My mind has been for centuries shaped in a particular culture. But my mind is the mind of an individual. Of course, it's true that the culture has existed for centuries, but every individual within the culture is quite different, I think. And sometimes Krishnamurti has this way of talking about depths of centuries as if the individual has been conditioned for centuries. You can see how there's some truth in that we have scriptures, for instance, which have lasted for centuries, and clearly each individual is conditioned by their parents and their grandparents and their grandparents' parents and so on. So in that way, it does go back for centuries, certainly for it goes back as long as the evolution of human beings. So experience, time, knowledge, memory, these are all terms for conditioning in a way. We can't really say that conditioning is all bad. Conditioning includes language, for instance. If we didn't have conditioning, we wouldn't have language. We wouldn't be able to make anything. We wouldn't have tools. We wouldn't know how to cook. So conditioning is not all bad. It's the parts of conditioning that distort our mind when we're trying to love, when we're trying to perceive non-dual reality that are problematic. So Krishnamurti says it's conditioned, shaped, held within a narrow pattern of the me. So the me meaning actually not what I really am, but what I think I am is the me, my self-image. So the me that thinks I am an Englishman, I am a Buddhist, I am this. This is the me. The false image of the self actually is the me, and that's a narrow pattern. It's a narrow pattern because it's in the mind, and the mind is very limited. Anything that we can think of in the mind is not as complex as reality. It's not as beautiful as reality. It's not reality. Reality is vast. The me is the image of the me, which is narrow, it's small. So can such a mind become aware of its own conditioning? In other words, can the real me become aware of the false image of the me? And I think the answer is yes. The real me can look and see, oh, I have a false image of the me. I have an image of I am Indian, I am English, I am something. And that's false. And I can see that it's false. And when that's seen, then that narrowness begins to open out a little bit, and we can maybe say, oh, so I'm not that. Well, if I'm not limited by nationality, religion, gender, and so on, then what actually is left? What's left there? And of course, what's left is the non-dual fact of reality, which is love, which is the sacred, which is God, Brahman, whatever you want to say. So that's the question he's asking. Can such a mind become aware of its own conditioning? If it can, then maybe something interesting will happen. When it becomes aware of its own conditioning, who is aware of the conditioning? So who is the real self that becomes aware of the false, narrow self? Who is that? That's the one, that's the interesting one. Who am I? Who am I really? Who am I when I see who I'm not? So very direct question. When it becomes aware of its own conditioning, this it here, this word it, when it becomes aware of its own conditioning, who is aware of the conditioning? The it is Brahman, if you want to use that word, or reality, or love, non-dual fact, the truth. So, conditioning. Truth is a pathless land, and you cannot approach it by any path whatsoever, by any religion, by any sect. Truth, being limitless, unconditioned, unapproachable by any path whatsoever, cannot be organized, nor should any organization be formed to do that. I'm sure we've read that a million times. In terms of what we're saying today, we can maybe see this as painting a picture of truth, which is non-dual reality without boundaries, always being present, and any path or organization or concept that we create is an obstacle to seeing it. So any concept that we have obscures the truth. So if we can just set aside all those concepts, set aside the organizations, set aside the path, and just look at what's here and now, in the absence of concepts, in the absence of identifications, then we might see what this thing is that is truth. At least we might see part of it. Of course, the whole truth is unfathomably vast, countless light years of scale, and at the same time, if you look close up, going right down to the subatomic level of detail. So the vastness and complexity of truth vastly exceeds anything that the human mind can see. So we can't see the whole truth. We can't know the whole truth. And yet, everything that we look at, everything real, is part of the truth. So that maybe that's up. So we see that truth, reality, is unconditioned. Reality is not affected by the concepts that we have about it, at least not directly. It may be indirectly affected because, for example, if I have a concept about reality that says, I don't know, I want to kill those people over there, so then I go and kill those people over there, and that's actually affected reality. So reality can be affected by our conditioning. Our conditioning can cause us to do stupid things which damage reality. Our conditioning might also cause us to do good things that might have benefits. So truth, reality is unconditioned. It's outside of conditioning, yet the human mind is conditioned by second-hand information from another human being. Whether that's in conversation, through a book, a newspaper, a movie, or any other transmission. So right now I'm talking in concepts. Maybe you listen to my concepts and understand them in some way. You're being conditioned by what I'm saying. Now, what I'm trying to do is get you to uncondition yourself so that you can see that happening and you can reject concepts and look instead directly at reality. So what I'm trying to say is, don't look at the concepts I'm telling you, look at the truth, look at reality. Look for yourself. Oh, I should say this page is not from Krishnamurti. This is me. This is my writing, not Krishnamurti's writing. So if you're a Krishnamurti purist who is only interested in Krishnamurti's teachings, then you might not like this page. I don't know. So it's language and art, I'm saying, that forms second-hand conditioning. So if I look at a tree, I'm seeing the tree, I'm seeing a real thing. But if I listen to somebody talking about a tree, then I'm getting second-hand ideas about the tree. It's not as good, generally. Although maybe it has value. Maybe if I listen to a biologist talking about a tree, I might learn some things about the tree that I didn't know before. Or if I listen to a poet talking about a tree, maybe the poet will make me think about the tree in a new way. So second-hand conditioning as well might not be all bad, but it's still second-hand conditioning. It's not the direct perception of truth. The direct perception of reality is the key that allows us to see through conditioning. So when we perceive reality directly, we're looking at the sacred, we're looking at God, we're looking at non-dual truth. That allows us to see through conditioning. Okay. Sorry, this is a very complex slide, isn't it? There's too much information here on a slide. I try not to do this. I try to put only about 5 or 6 ideas on a slide. I've got far too many here. Sorry about that. So reality, perception, words, and conditioning. So what I'm saying here is that there are, in a way, 3 levels of truth, or 3 levels of information about truth that we can get. So the first level is reality, which is truth. It's immensely complex and detailed. It's far beyond the capacity of the human mind to contain, model, or predict. It's beautiful. It's nurturing. It gave birth to us. It's reality. It's what we are. It's ever new. It never repeats itself. This moment will never happen again. It's a one-off in every moment. It gave birth to us. It is our mother. And at the same time, we are part of that process. We also maybe take part in producing the next generation. So we are part of that mother. We are nurturing our children, or teaching our children, or playing whatever role we play in the world. We are part of it. So that's reality, which is truth. Then there's direct perception, which is I, as an individual, I'm looking and seeing something real. So I see a flower, I see a sunset, I see you, I see a living being. I look in the mirror and see myself. I use my senses to perceive directly. So we hear the wind in the trees, a child's laugh, a distant, quiet sound that points to silence. So this is one of my favorite meditation techniques, is to sit under a tree and listen to the quietest, furthest sound. And when we do that, quite often we become conscious of something else that's even further and even quieter. And that's very interesting as well. So this is direct perception, perceiving the world directly. So it can be as simple as noticing the feeling of our own bodies. How do I feel right now? How do the palms of my hands feel? How do the soles of my feet feel? How does my heart feel? How does my stomach feel? So the breath, how am I breathing? What's happening in my spine? And I feel that yogic energy flowing in the spine. So all of these are direct perception of reality, perception of what reality is. And then we have the conditioning or second-hand ideas. We remember a word. So maybe somebody said yesterday, oh, sit under a tree and meditate. Okay, so we go and that we remember that. We remember those words, and maybe we go and do it. So that's not such a bad thing. But usually words are oversimplifications. They're always inaccurate. They never hold the complete picture. Words are always, I'm tempted to say words are always lies, but that's not quite right. That also would be a lie. It would be a lie to say that words are always lies. So anyway, we talk in words, we write books, other people read or listen to our words and are somewhat misled. So whatever somebody says, it's misleading to some extent. Of course, some words are more misleading than others. Some ideas are more misleading than others. Some teachings are deliberately designed to be lies, whereas some are genuine efforts to be honest. So even if everyone is being honest and sincere, there's still plenty of room for error in words. So this is why second-hand ideas are particularly dangerous. So this brings us to the question of babies and bathwater. Can such a mind become aware of its own conditioning? So this is the same Krishnamurti quote we saw before. When it becomes aware of its own conditioning, who is aware of the conditioning? Who are you? Who is the real you who becomes aware of that? First, are you and I aware of our conditioning? Are we aware of all of the dogmas, all of the ideas that we have that we think are true, all of the identifications that we have? I am a fill in the blank. If we are aware of that, then maybe we can take the next step. And it's interesting here that he uses this phrase, the next step. He said, truth is a pathless land. And yet here he is, step after step, walking on a path. So, which reminded me of this quote from Ram Dass, also known as Richard Alpert, who said, on the spiritual path, we are always on the first step. I really like that quote. I think that's quite nice. It's saying the same thing, isn't it? That in a sense, it's completely pathless. You're either on that first step or you're not. In other words, you're either aware right now of what's happening or you're not. It's kind of binary thing, isn't it? You're on the step or you're not on the step. If you're aware of your conditioning and you're aware of what's happening, then here it is. Here it is. Just like that. Simple as that. Here's the presence of the other. Here's the presence of the sacred. But if you're not doing that, you're busy living a habitual life, living from memory and from habit, then you're not on that first step. And in that case, it's time to take that first step, wake up and be aware. So, how do we get past our conditioning? Again, we've got these three levels. I know this is three different levels, isn't it? So direct perception outwardly. So we spoke about this a second ago, senses, awareness of the real. So that just means opening your eye and looking, or listening, or touching, or feeling your own body. And there's the presence of what Krishnamurti called the other. The other is really the one, isn't it? It's the self. It's the self in the sense that Ramana Maharshi used the term self. Everything, Brahman. Oh, sorry, I think somebody is shouting a little bit there, but if you could mute your microphone, that would be appreciated. Thanks. So awareness of the real, presence of the other, presence of the sacred, beautiful, nurturing. Can it be seen outwardly that there is no boundary between self and not self? So here I'm using the term self with a little s in the conventional sense. I have this idea that I am an individual, a self, and then I look for the boundary between self and not self, between what I am and what the universe is. And when I look for that boundary outwardly, what I see is that I can't find any such boundary. You might think the boundary is at the skin, but actually the skin is not a boundary. The skin is a medium through which communication happens. So it's a very much a permeable layer, the skin. There's the wind blows onto my skin, and that sensation is felt inwardly. I eat food, the food comes from the outside through into my mouth and becomes part of me. So there's no boundary there. There is no boundary there. It's completely free. Things are flowing from outside to inside and from inside to outside all the time. The breath is another very good example. So there is no boundary between self and not self. There's no fixed boundary there. And that's something we can see with our senses, just looking outwardly, without any introspection, just looking outwardly, we can see that there's no boundary between self and not self. So then really this is the focus of this talk, seeing through thought. So in other words, we've got these 6 dragons of thought, 6 different types of illusion, and maybe we can see through them. So the mind sees itself. The mind sees its image of itself and realizes that that's wrong. Thought sees the limitations of thought. So I can think, I'm thinking in words, and I know that words have limitations. So I can see the limitations of my own thoughts. Following the roots of thought to the end, we arrive at what came before thought, maybe. Maybe we also arrive at what's there after thought. So when thought finishes, I've finished a thought, what happens next? Maybe there's a little moment of silence. Maybe there's some kind of perception. Maybe there's an opportunity to be aware of what's real. And then direct perception inwardly. We haven't really talked about this yet so much. So awareness of awareness. So being directly aware of one's own awareness. The Sanskrit term Satchit Ananda, the bliss of being aware, or we could maybe say the bliss of aware being, awareness of awareness. I am aware, I am. What am I? So Krishnamurti liked to talk about wordless, choiceless awareness. So when there's this awareness of awareness, it doesn't need any words, it doesn't need any concepts. There's no choice about it. It's very passive. It's surrender to the fact of what is, which is bliss. So seeing fully, observing without labeling, without words, therefore without a thinker. So there's no little me. There's no sense of I am a ... Instead, there's just the perception of what is, which is a very beautiful, blissful, enjoyable situation. So that's what happens, we hope, if we can get past our conditioning. So that brings us on to the next dragon, dogma and authority. So to discover for ourselves what is truth, we must first reject all dogma and authority. So yeah, same thing. If we want to find out what reality is, it's not helpful to be clinging on to second-hand ideas that we've read in a book somewhere or that somebody told us. We have to look for ourselves first. We need to see it for ourselves. So what is dogma? Well, it's self-reinforced, self-hypnotic conditioning. So it's a bit worse than ordinary conditioning. Ordinary conditioning is just what we learn from our experience. But dogma is where we say, no, I want to believe in this. So I decide to be a Catholic, for example. And so I have my set of, Catholicism is a very good example because it has a rigid set of ideas called the Catechism, which is literally a set of dogmas which you have to say you believe if you want to be a Catholic. Many of which are highly debatable, but this is what you have to say you believe if you want to be a Catholic. So dogma is a decision, a choice to say that you believe in these ideas and to try to force yourself to believe in them. And we might do that with Hinduism as well. We might say, I strongly believe that Atman is Brahman, for instance, and so I'm going to say that's true. Maybe it is true, but saying that it's true is a very poor substitute for actually looking for yourself and observing the fact that it's true. So yeah, we can obviously have dogmas in whatever kind of religion or ideology we want to follow, whether it's Catholic, Hindu, Buddhist. We decide to learn the dogmas. We decide to repeat the dogmas. We decide to learn intellectual defenses of them so that when somebody criticizes it, we say, oh, no, that's not true. And we have fixed responses to defend them. So somebody says the Pope is infallible, or Mary was a virgin when she gave birth to Jesus. And we defend these ideas and say that we believe in them. So if we do this, then yeah, it's very difficult to see reality through these kind of ideas. If we really want to say Lord Hanuman jumped over the sea to Sri Lanka with his tail on fire, maybe there's a metaphorical sense in which that's true. There's certainly lots of interesting things we can learn from that story. But if we have a dogmatic belief that this is literally true, then that's going to obscure the actual perception of reality. So Krishnamurti said, you have security in belief in dogmas, but that is merely an idea which can be shattered by argument, by doubt, by questioning, by demanding freedom. When one realizes, not as an idea, that there is no such thing as security, permanency, then authority has no meaning whatsoever. So it's interesting here, he says there is no such thing as permanency. So, of course, this is one of the key ideas of Buddhism as well, the idea of anicca. Nothing is permanent, everything is changing, and therefore there is no security. The only security is to be found in the present moment. You can't be sure about the future. Everything's changing. So every existing thing, as Buddha said, has three qualities: anicca, anatta, and dukkha. See it for yourself. We can all look and see. Everything is impermanent. Every part of everything is impermanent. So there's no core or essence that is unchanging anywhere. And those facts can cause suffering, dukkha, if we don't understand them fully. Maybe even if we do understand them fully, they can still cause some suffering. If you when someone you love dies, that's impermanence, and it causes suffering even if we fully understand it. So yeah, there's suffering in reality, that's a fact. So to live peacefully every day, it means you have really no nationality, no religion, no dogma, no authority. I think that's all clear. Peace means to love, to be kind. If you haven't that, then you are responsible for all the confusion. So again, here is Krishnamurti really laying on the guilt trip. You are responsible. If you have no love, if you are not kind, then all the wars in history are your fault. That's quite harsh, isn't it? But you can see the sense in which he's absolutely right, that the mind which doesn't express kindness in its actions That is the mind that has caused every conflict in history. The absence of love, or the absence of the perception of love, and therefore the absence of the acting from love is the cause of all the confusion. So one's mind is always thinking in duality, in comparison, in competition, and such a mind functioning in fragments cannot see the whole. So here we are again. So the whole, meaning the non-dual truth, which is love, and the fragments, meaning these broken, partial half-truths expressed in words, these various dragons of concept that we're talking about. So if one is a Hindu, if one looks at the world from one's little window as the Hindu, believing in certain dogmas, rituals, traditions, brought up in a certain culture and so on, obviously one does not see the whole of mankind. And I'm saying that's questionable because I'm saying that clearly there have been many people who have been Hindus and who have succeeded in seeing the whole. I think that's quite a common thing. In fact, many people have certainly seen flashes of love, of the whole, of the non-dual truth, and many people have seen it quite often, seen it as an experience that continues. I'm sorry, does somebody have a comment or question or something?
No, I think somebody was unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so we're saying that if we follow and accept an ideology, which is dogma, an idea in words, whether it's good or bad, whether it's holy or unholy, it's a fragmentary activity, and it therefore causes conflict. So when we have a dogma, even if the dogma is pretty good, maybe it's a good idea, like, I don't know, love your neighbor, it's a good idea. But if we take that as a dogma, then it's a fragmentary activity and it causes conflict. So, for example, I might see somebody who doesn't love his neighbor enough, and I might say, "You aren't loving your neighbor," and go and hit him. So, any dogma causes conflict, and we don't really want dogmas. Conflict will inevitably arise because there's a division between what is and what should be. So if we're saying this dogma should be true, and then we look at reality, and of course sometimes the dogma is not true, and therefore there's a conflict and we lose energy. Whereas if one sees as one sees the microphone, so he's saying there's a microphone in front of him as he's talking, and he's saying you can see what's in front of you clearly, directly. Then you understand the essential truth of a life in which there's no conflict at all. So he's saying by direct perception of what's immediately in front of your eyes, that's the life with no conflict. You're looking at what is, not at what should be. So you're seeing directly. So direct wordless perception of the real world, which is truth, is the way to subvert dogma. In other words, the way to reject it and get past it. Truth is the end of conflict, in other words. So to summarize that, dogma is fixed, permanent, unchanging ideas which we promote as though they were true forever, which they are not. So when we recognize this dragon, the dragon of dogma, we recognize it when somebody says, this is true, this will always be true, and we can say, not really. No, it's not. Nothing is always true. We therefore reject it. However, there's the question of the baby and the bathwater again. No statements are true forever, but some statements are closer to the truth than others, and this is vital. So if we reject all statements, then that's nihilism. If we say everything is false, everything is meaningless, that's a horrible philosophy. That's nihilism. That's the worst kind of philosophy. So that's what we should look at next. So nihilism throws the baby out with the bathwater. The nihilist takes very seriously the idea that all ideas are false and fails to notice that this too is an idea that is therefore false. It's not true that all ideas are false. If it was, then the idea that all ideas are false would be true, and that's an idea. So that's a very nice logical proof of the falsehood of nihilism. So we can say no idea is true forever, everywhere, but we cannot say all ideas are false forever, everywhere. Nihilists are fools who say there's no truth. Reality is unreal. Nothing matters. So this is, in a way, the worst possible dogma, the worst possible ideology, to say that there is no truth, there is no beauty, there is no love, nothing is real, nothing matters, nothing's important. Now, nihilism has real value sometimes when you're in absolutely desperate situations where you don't understand what's happening to you and you're suffering and everything is crazy. Nihilism can be quite helpful to just say, oh, all of this isn't real. It's not real. Just dissociate yourself from it completely. So it can be a mental, a kind of mental trick to use as a painkiller. So when the real situation is so bad for the individual that we really just can't face it, then we can say, oh, this isn't really happening. This is not real. And your brain can just reject reality. And maybe that enables you to survive a terrible situation. And later you can heal in some way. But when we emerge from the traumatic situation, when we start to heal and start to function again in the world, we must once again confront the truth. The reality is real. It matters. Of course, bad things happen. That's also part of reality. People we love die. There are evil people who have power and torture and kill people. And sometimes there's nothing we can do about that. Reality is terrifying and horrifying, and sometimes, and locally, that is. If you look at the bigger picture, if you step back and see the bigger picture, then you can see that all of those terrible, horrible things are happening at a fairly small scale and are part of the evolution of something much bigger and more beautiful. But from our individual human perspective, sometimes reality is absolutely terrible. You see a child dying, maybe your child is dying of cancer. How do you live with that? Or your child is being tortured by some evil tyrant. How do you live with that? Maybe nihilism is a way to deal with that kind of short-term horror. So it's not that nihilism has no uses. Nihilism is a dragon that we can tame, we can understand, we can use in the appropriate place, but at the same time, we can know that it's a concept and we can know that it's false. Reality is real and beautiful. Truth is real and beautiful. Another use of nihilism is to use it as a dishonest argument to undermine false dogma and fraudulent authority. So we see this a lot in social media debates, where maybe a scientist will say something that's true and some nihilist idiot comes along and says, oh, nothing is real, so why should I believe you? Clearly, these arguments are unworthy, false, immoral, and untrue. However, on social media, it sometimes looks as though nihilist arguments are quite successful because they're so easy for stupid people to understand. And a lot of people are stupid. It's an unfortunate fact. More than 50% of people have an IQ of 100 or less. And people with an IQ of 100, if you talk to them, they're not very smart. But they can understand nihilism. It's very easy to understand nihilism. So this is quite a dangerous little corner of philosophy, actually, nihilism. So I'm saying here it's morally better to say your claim is false, here is the evidence, rather than to say all claims are false, no evidence can be accepted. Throwing the baby out with the bathwater is not a good argument in any situation. So the baby, meaning reality, evidence, reason, honesty, science, truth. We don't want to throw that out with the false dogmas and the fraudulent authorities. It's quite important, I think. Okay, so that's nihilism. How do we defeat it? Well, if somebody says that they believe in nihilism, here's a good argument. Okay, you say nothing is real. So if I punch you in the nose, that doesn't matter, right? So if nothing matters, give me all your money. Give me your wife. Give me your house if nothing matters. So if someone asserts that nihilism is true, it rapidly becomes easy to demonstrate that this person is a hypocrite. Unless, of course, they really are. They really do believe this, in which case maybe they won't be bothered if someone punches them in the nose. Maybe they will willingly give up all their possessions. That would be quite impressive. That might be something deeper than nihilism that actually might deserve a certain amount of respect. But I think in general, we're not going to meet people like that. We're going to meet people who claim to be nihilists, but in fact still want to possess things. So every real object and every real subject cries out that nihilism is false. The beauty of the world says that nihilism is false. But there is a seed of truth in it. It's true that no statement in words can be the whole truth. It's true that dogmas are false. Nevertheless, some statements are closer to the truth than others. And of course, science is the process of getting rid of ideas that are proven false. And in that way, we move closer to the truth, although we never fully arrive at it because the truth is too complex for a human mind to understand. So I think that's covered. That's the claim that the Earth is flat with four corners is easy to disprove. The claim that Earth is a spheroidal planet spinning through space is much harder to disprove because all the evidence suggests that it's true. So I mentioned here Karl Popper and his idea that falsification of the false is the scientific method, not validation of the true. And Krishnamurti said something very similar. When the false is clearly seen as false, then the truth reveals itself. So that's what we're talking about here, seeing through these false dragons and therefore hopefully revealing something about the truth. So when nihilism is defeated, we clearly see that I am, the world is, reality is real. When we see all things as a single whole, we begin to see the world as it really is. So I've taken a little bit longer than I expected here. I've wasted an hour of your time already. So, oh, somebody has questions. Ah, yes, Jesus allowed himself nailed. That's very true, yes. I don't think Jesus was a nihilist, though. And someone says, dogma belongs to a religion, but being dogmatic is about me. Ah, okay, yes, true. So dogmatic as an adjective, meaning a person is dogmatic, meaning a person tends to have fixed ideas and believe them. Yeah, that could be a habitual behavior. It's certainly true. Today's meeting is very, very beautiful. Ah, excellent. Yes, yes, yes. Here and now is very beautiful. Yes, I certainly agree with that. Conditioning mind can be aware of its conditioning, he said in an interview. Yes, 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 that's the point we've made, isn't it? The conditioned mind can be aware of its conditioning. So the mind, the real self, is much bigger than the little narrow me, which is what the mind believes it is. So yeah. Conditioning that creates or reinforces an identity is the obstacle. Yeah, absolutely. If I have an identity, an idea of what I am is an identity, isn't it? I think I am this. But what I really am is too big to be imagined, too detailed to be imagined. Yeah, good. So lots of interesting talks there. Somebody says, "Sir, please make it short." Okay, yes. Somebody else says, "Interesting. Truth is truth. It depends how we see." Yes, certainly, absolutely true. So that's all very, very good. So, shall I open the floor to questions? Anyone have
No, so you play all the slides. We will screenshot them.
Okay, jolly good. So let's look through quickly at solipsism then. Solipsism is a step more interesting than nihilism. Harshad has something to say there. Sorry, Harshad, do you have something to add?
Yes. Are you able to hear?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Thank you, Peter. You have prepared very well. Actually, very powerful, very clear, very fluent. So I am very simple. I cannot be so articulate as you are, but I see in terms of images. The image which comes to me is like a very pure diamond, and around it there are many dark clothes. And so the light of that diamond is blocked. So I think in that way that there are many obstacles to go right to the essence behind the word, a non-verbal way of seeing what is as it is unfolding. We are all human beings, and we are made from the same matter, but we are so different because on one side we have people like Buddha, and the other side we have people like Hitler. So there is a great potential exists in human beings to remove this dark cloths. And if we are completely dark, then we cannot do it. So it seems that there is a possibility of seeing the false. And once that maybe opens up, that possibility of seeing clearly, then there is a possibility of touching the source from where all the thoughts and feelings are arising. So religious people, they say that we are made in the image of God, and psychologists and scientists, they are saying that we are coming from the animal world. So these are different, quite opposing views. Whatever it may be, whichever is true, I don't know. But it seems that in spite of having many problems in our life, there is a possibility of touching that source. It may come by reading a book, by meeting some enlightened human being. So that possibility exists. So this is what I have to say right now, that there is something within us, a real treasure buried, and many people have been able to touch, and they have written poems about that inner being, true, real self. So that is very good that the possibility exists for all human beings, whether we are fortunate to go right to the source of our thoughts and feelings, that we don't know. Maybe some people are born with ability to see clearly at their own thinking.
Arshad Saab, if you have any questions, you please ask.
Arshad
Saab, if you have any questions, you please ask.
Please,
Yes,
don't get
thank you.
impatient. Don't get
Yes.
impatient, please. Peter, I think a large number of people want you to show all your slides before asking questions. I'll request you to please go ahead.
Okay.
And I will also request participants to not intervene in between when somebody is speaking. Please have patience. I'm reading all your chats, so please have patience.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you for that,
Yeah.
Harshad. I think that what Harshad said is absolutely the point, that we all, or maybe not all, but I think most of us, probably more than 90% of us, have the possibility to touch the beauty of the sacred quite easily, actually, in every moment. You know, all we have to do really is just look at the beauty of the world, and it's right here. It's not that we have to study for years or practice difficult meditation techniques. The absolute beauty of the sacred, of love, is right here, and it's available to be seen, to be perceived directly by pretty much everyone, with the possible exception of people, you mentioned Hitler, so psychopaths, people who are incapable of feeling love, maybe would not be able to perceive this kind of thing. But I think the short-term experience of feeling bliss in the present moment is quite easy. It's quite easy to touch. And then what's a little bit more difficult is extending the amount of time that we spend in that bliss. And of course, the object would be to spend pretty much all the time in that bliss and be able to act from that bliss and live from that bliss all the time. That's a big ask, because we live in a world that's full of suffering and false ideas. Anyway, let me run through these slides, and then we'll get back to the next bit. So solipsism. So dictionary definition of solipsism: really, only my mind exists. So the idea that everything is happening just in my mind. Quite a silly idea. If a tree falls in a forest but I don't hear it, then it didn't make a sound. So I think it's quite easy to reject this. And yet, if we look online, there are many, many people promoting this kind of ideology, saying that this is Buddhism, or this is Hinduism, or this is some deep insight that they've got. There's a guy called Rupert Spira in particular who has sold a lot of books and basically says that spirituality is the same as solipsism. So I would say it's quite silly. Solipsists, by definition, believe that it's impossible to refute solipsism. They are, of course, wrong. Yeah. So how can we correct this misapprehension? So the correct understanding is that the universe contains and gave birth to human beings. Or Brahman expands and evolves into myriad living beings, including humans. The incorrect understanding, the solipsistic argument, is that Atman is larger than Brahman. My human mind somehow contains and gives birth to the universe. So what really happens is that my mind gives birth to my image of the universe, but my image of the universe is very small and crude and fragmentary and inaccurate. The proof of it is very easy. It's the fact that we can't predict the universe. If the universe was a product of our minds, we would be able to predict it, and we can't. So that proves that the universe is bigger than our minds. It's not that our minds are bigger than the universe. So a little diagram of that. That's the wrong view. That's the wrong view. That's the right view. Yeah, it's not a particularly helpful thing. So the next thing there is egotism. So I'm sure we're all familiar with egotism. The egotist thinks I am very important. I should have pleasure. It doesn't matter so much about other people. I can hurt them. That doesn't matter. What matters is that I have pleasure and comfort. So the consequences of that, addiction, short-term thinking, arrogance, loneliness, regret, that's all fairly obvious, isn't it? The antidote to egotism, one possible antidote, is enlightened self-interest. So if you are very egotistical, you can still see that it will be in my interest to be nice to other people, because then guess what? They will be nice to me in the future. So even within a very egotistical mindset, it's possible to find good arguments for rejecting egotism and for starting to behave from a more altruistic perspective. Compassionate relationships with others are extremely satisfying and enjoyable. In fact, if we don't have compassionate relationships with others, our lives tend to be very miserable. Gratitude is a beautiful thing to feel. The more we feel gratitude, generally the happier we are. There's a lot of research recently about gratitude and how powerful it is. Just remembering to feel grateful can make the difference between somebody living a life of depression and somebody living a life of happiness and being able to contribute a lot more. So gratitude is extremely important. Happiness is important. And you can't be happy by being an egotist. Being selfish will not make you happy. So that's all clear. Last one then, relativism. The idea that my ideas are no better than other people's ideas. This is a slippy one. This is quite dangerous, and a lot of people fall into this. So for example, if I have a direct perception of something, but then someone else comes along and says, no, your direct perception is wrong, I know better than you. There's a tendency, especially for people who have low self-esteem, there's a tendency for people to think, oh, well, those other guys know better than me, so my ideas are no better than theirs. And so we put other people's ideas, which may be wrong, which may be lies, we put those ideas ahead of our own ideas that come through direct perception. And that's a disaster. This is what you might call a slave mentality or a submissive mentality. And we can see it a lot in people who are followers of religions, followers of gurus. So you know, actually we can see for ourselves. we can see for ourselves what God is. We can see for ourselves what goodness is. But we let somebody else tell us because we think my ideas are no better than other people's ideas. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Actually, no. If your opinion is false, how entitled are you to that? How much credit should we give to opinions that are false? This is again quite a controversial area of philosophy, isn't it? It's very much a political question. When we debate, when we have discussions about what is true, which do we give priority? Do we give our own direct perception of truth priority, or do we maybe give the majority perception? If we live in, say we live in a Muslim country and everybody else around us is saying, I don't know, adulterers should be stoned to death, which do we give priority? Do we give our own feeling that stoning people to death for adultery is a really bad idea, or do we give priority to other people, maybe millions of other people, who all say that's a good idea? So this is the problem of relativism. I know what my ideas are. I don't know what other people's ideas are. Other people may well be lying. So this is why following leaders is a bad idea. And intellectual arguments as well. If I'm very clever, I mean, Harshad was just telling me that I'm very eloquent or fluent and good at intellectual ideas, which is probably true. I've spent my whole life doing that. That's dangerous, because maybe I can spew out some set of ideas and people start believing it and following it and ignoring their own direct perception of the truth. and saying, well, you know, this guy Peter seems very clever, we should obey him, we should follow him. That's a disaster. People should look for themselves, find out the truth. Grounding makes the truth clear and obvious. We need to ground our ideas in direct perception of reality. Then we know what we're talking about, whereas second-hand ideas, we really do not. Conclusion, ideas should be taken less seriously than directly perceived facts. Yeah, that sums it up pretty nicely. Anything you have that's an idea, a concept, it might be interesting, it might be a helpful concept, it might be useful. There's lots of useful concepts. Science is very useful, but we should not take it more seriously than the facts we can directly perceive. If what we directly perceive contradicts what somebody tells us, we should go with what we see for ourselves. That's the conclusion. Because what we see for ourselves is the truth. We can see the truth directly. All our senses are means of perceiving truth. There is no way to summarize reality without missing important details. There we go. That's another way of saying the same thing. If I try to summarize reality, I'm going to be largely wrong. What I say is going to be fragmentary. It's not going to be the truth. Okay, so that is that. Summary of Kay's teaching. What we're trying to do is to transform miserable, ignorant people into good, ecstatically aware people. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't work, it's probably your fault, not Kay's. That's kind of it. Yeah. Okay, that's maybe a good place to end on. I was going to do some other stuff. Oh yeah, I had a look at ChatGPT. I don't know if you've used ChatGPT, but it's very good at philosophy. It knows all about Krishnamurti's teachings as well. If you ask ChatGPT to discuss Krishnamurti, it can do that. So I got ChatGPT to refute nihilism and refute solipsism. And it did that very nicely. So we now have machines that can refute solipsism and refute nihilism. So I think that's very interesting. And that can define reality. This is quite an interesting thing. The machine can define reality. Reality is the totality of all things and phenomena that exist, whether physical or abstract, tangible or intangible. It encompasses everything that is, has been, or will be, regardless of our awareness or perception of it. That's a really good definition of reality. That's exactly the kind of thing that I've been saying. So ChatGPT is quite a clever system, it turns out. Anyway, that is the end of my talk. So thank you very much for listening. I hope I didn't go on too long, and I'm very happy to answer any questions anyone may have. Anyone wants to?
Thank you, Peter. Please stop sharing the screen so that we can have the whole grade. Yeah. And we have Harish ji asking questions, so please unmute yourself.
Okay, namaste. Well, I just wanted to say one thing. Peter, well, I appreciate. I really liked. I always like what Peter says. Peter referred to love thy neighbor as a dogma. I'm afraid love thy neighbor is a simple teaching of Jesus. Like Peter asked me, Harish, do you love me? I said, oh, no, not quite. But why? You say you love humanity. Yeah, that is okay. That is a theory. But I don't love you because you are not my neighbor. So I have turned that simple teaching into a dogma. And the same way, if somebody is going for, let's say, 10-day regularly, goes for 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat, and I say, look, you stand no chance of discovering truth. Why? Because haven't you heard that truth is a pathless land? So if you don't subscribe to what Krishna said, truth is a pathless land, and you are following a path, you have no chance. So I have turned that one of the perceptions of Krishnamurti into a dogma. So it really depends upon us. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. A dogma is an idea, a collection of words that people imagine to be the truth. And it's not, it's just a collection of words. So even when we say something very, very beautiful, like Atman is Brahman or love thy neighbor, these are beautiful teachings, but we can make them into dogmas. And yeah, at that point, it ceases to have validity. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Peter. I think, Peter, you talked about Krishnamurti's teachings, little bit of Indian tradition, and then Buddhism and other philosophies. It was a beautiful talk. I just want to make a few comments. You said that conditioning, and you talked about conditioning, and then mentioned that there are one can be taught methods to eliminate these conditionings. I personally feel, because my knowledge is based purely on Krishnamurti's teachings, that I think being aware of one's conditioning is the beginning to get freedom. So that is one thing that I wanted to mention. Second point is, perceiving is seeing. You don't need memory to see anything. If you perceive, you see it directly. And the third point I wanted to say is, instead of asking who am I think it would be more pertinent to ask what am I? That makes a lot more sense.
Yep.
The last point is being aware of awareness. I think that is a state of totally unawareness, because you can't be aware of being aware. So when you are unaware, then only you know that you are aware. So this is what I wanted to say, but it's a beautiful speech. You covered it all, and it was a great work of scholarship. Thanks a lot. Thank you. And I will request Dr. Pradeep Verma to say something. Yes, he has raised his hand. Yes, sir. Unmute yourself. Pradeep ji, unmute. You are not unmuted, sir. Yes, now. Yes, now.
Yeah. I am audible.
Yes.
Okay. You see, a few questions by listening to Peter. To me, conditioning cannot be quantified. The moment we say that there are 6 or 10 or a number of factors responsible behind this, then something in me divides immediately. 6, what are those 6? And whether I know about it, go to Google, go for solipsism, go for this thing, go for that thing, relativism, and all the entire thing starts in me. That is one thing. Then direct perception was also very much emphasized, but this direct perception by all of us is by a conditioned mind. We know that we are all conditioned. You see, direct perception, there is, by all of us, is through our condition, right? Sir? Then, most of us are aware of our conditioning. That was also a mention that are you aware of your conditioning? Yes, we are. Most of us are aware of their conditioning, but what if we like those conditionings? You see, some of the conditionings are definitely helping, not 1, thousands, millions. And that's why it is perpetuating. You see, this is what thing. Then all the teachings and their organizations based on partly perceptual and largely conceptual evolved out of mind for the alleviation of human suffering. Suffering continues unabated and in greater and greater proportions. What could be the reason behind it? Can we see what is right now? You see, something is permanent. What is human suffering, as we all can see? I'm not thinking. Think is around poverty, exploitation, discrimination, and fragmentation. You see.
Well, can I answer some of that?
Yes.
So you said human suffering continues unabated.
Yeah.
I would question the word unabated. I think human suffering continues, certainly, but human suffering has been abated in many ways and many times. We've abated our suffering through lots of clever ideas that we've had. Buddhism is an example of a complex, beautiful philosophy which is totally designed to abate suffering. Abate meaning to reduce, to negate, to fight against suffering. Science, technology, books, all of these things are attempts to abate suffering, and they have been somewhat successful. We are suffering a lot less than our ancestors suffered. We don't have smallpox anymore. Very few people are starving to death these days, although, of course, some still are starving to death, and that may even get worse over the next year because of the horrors that are going on in Ukraine right now. So yeah, there's certainly lots of human suffering. I agree with you on that. But I don't agree that it's unabated. I think lots of us are doing our best to abate it. And probably you too, right? Your mind is also quite busy trying to abate suffering. I think so. So we're doing our best. We are doing our best. I totally agree with you that saying there are 6 types of conditioning, as I did in that talk, is completely arbitrary. I could just as well have said 2 types or 10 types. I came across 6 things I wanted to talk about, so they were the 6 I talked about. If we can solve those 6, I think there'll be a lot less suffering. Probably I've missed some other causes of suffering, and we can deal with those after.
Main suffering, I think you have said it earlier, that I want everybody wants permanency in an impermanent world.
Yeah.
Ever fluctuating.
Yeah, and we
this
can't
is the
have
main
it.
suffering. You see, this is the main suffering. You see, a fast mutating virus as desires, you see, raped the human mind long back globally. You see, that is still working in me, around me, everything, that virus, fast mutating, changing into technology, not knowing fully what the technology will yield into. Ultimately, we see we are trying all sorts of things, as you said, that abatement is there. I may delay the death, but the quality of life, what has happened to the quality of life?
Surely quality of life is better now than it was 100 years ago. Wouldn't you agree? On the whole, on average.
Yes, age because of lot of availability of food.
Right.
The quality of food is not, it's not questioned. You see,
and quality of information as well. There's more information now.
Quality of information about the organic. Why we are shifting towards this organic? We are taking a wrong turn, going back again and again. So this is, if it is abatement, then it is too much, because what types of patients you have in these hospitals, full of them. What types of patients? Psychiatrists and psychology has become a greater thing with so much of abundance, so much of nutrition available. What type of nutrition we are taking? And the quality of life, if we see overall, is it the desire? What for transformation is required? Transformation of mind, what for it is required? When everything is so well, we are getting more and more things, more and more weapons, more and more this and that and that. This more, the desire, the virus of desire is very much working, developing into technology. And technology that you say this is not proper. Actually, what we said earlier, social media was wrong. If you go to social media, you will find all sorts of informations. You see, so what are we seeking actually? Thank you very much. I am taking a lot of time. Sorry for taking it. There is not enough time for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Varmaji. I think we have already crossed our time limit.
Yes, I know.
Okay, so I'll close it here, and I want to thank Peter once again for being with us and giving a wonderful discourse. Next week, we'll have Mina Martini. It will be at 6 p.m. in the evening. So please join us if you're free. Thank you, Peter. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Goodbye.
Please call Peter again. As I see, everybody wanted to listen him more.
Yes, we'll invite Peter again.
Please convey my feeling to him.
Yes, sure. We'll write to him once again. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.